If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong, here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. In this episode, I share the mic with Alex Whitaker, a former student and owner of West Coast Strength in West Salem, Oregon, to talk with participants in a 12-week challenge about diet, nutrition, and losing weight successfully.
Time, you're my center point. If I need to get weird or calm down, I'm going to look at you. Okay, so first off, I'm going to introduce my friend, Dr. Jeff Armstrong over here. Background on how Jeff and I met. I was an undergrad at Western Oregon University, and I used to be the head strength coach out there for a couple of years before they got money and they got a legit strength coach. So it was an awesome opportunity for me. It kind of fast forwarded my resume about 10 years. I got a lot of good resources and connections out of the experience there. One of them being Jeff here, and I think, are you one of the only professors that I had there that's still there right now?
I think that's the case, because Tom Kelly retired, Brian Castor retired, Rita Cardinal is still there, but she's having some health issues.
It's funny now.
I should tell you about.
Well, there's a lot of people that I went to school with that are now teaching there or somehow involved, and that's kind of weird for me because I feel like I'm honestly in my 20s. So the fact
you went
that
to school with Brandon, right?
Yeah, Professor Brandon. Yeah, so the fact that we're old enough to be teaching college classes is kind of a cool thing. So I own the gym, obviously. That's how most of you guys know me. I got the opportunity to be a strength coach way before I was qualified really to do anything. Like I said, it was a great opportunity for me because it got to expose me to a career about 10 years ahead of time. So if you don't know, before that, I was sponsored for powerlifting. I turned pro when I was 20, and then I got involved in strongman after that. I detached both my biceps, fractured my spine about 3 times. I've torn my right pec 10 times, my left pec 5 times, my left rotator cuff 5 times, and everything else on my body. So back in the day in Vietnam, I was a really strong guy. And with that, I got to meet a lot of world-class athletes. I got to meet a lot of coaches. I had a great experience at Western, which was cool for me because coming from a small town, I think if I would have gone to a bigger college, I kind of might have drowned in that. So from Astoria to Monmouth was kind of a nice, development for me. So I did strongman and powerlifting for a long time. When I was about 24 years old, come on in, you guys are in. Let me know if you guys need more chairs. We can grab something for you. I'm Alex. Nice to see you guys. And so what happened was everything was going well. I was making $5 a year to be able to be a pro athlete, and then I detached both my biceps and pretty quickly kind of saw the writing on the wall that I was not going to be able to compete as a pro anymore. I used to be, when I was in his class, probably about 330, 340 pounds. And my relationship with food was all about lift big, eat big, get big. I didn't care about anything else. I didn't care about health. I didn't care about wellness or anything like that. I really just wanted to be a better athlete. And at that time, if you said, hey, we'll let you live 20 years less, but you can win more, I absolutely would have signed my name anywhere for that. And then now that I'm in my 30s, my relationship with food has changed a lot because when my grandma taught me to eat when I'm happy, when I'm bored, and when I'm sad, I now don't necessarily get to sustain those habits as much anymore. So anyways, we finish up Western, tear my arms off, go through all that stuff, decide it's time to retire, decide it'd be a good idea to do a bodybuilding show. I starved myself to death. I dropped 85 pounds in 38 weeks. Hardest thing that I've ever done. It shot my knees, but I was kind of just trying to prove a point that I could take this big body and diet it down. So I forced it to do that. Started a nutrition store out at Western, and I started training athletes. The Western experience was cool because I got to have college athletes, some NFL players, but it's all about sports performance. Bigger, faster, stronger, not as much general population. And then when I left and I started my store, mostly what I ended up doing was training very normal people. I call them the bad moms. Have you ever seen that movie? It's all these moms that curse and, this is what they do when they're actually at soccer practice. So that, Tracy's not a bad mom, but Tracy has been with me for a long time. So I did that, and I fell into coaching bodybuilders. The majority of what I do now is I train higher level bodybuilders, some beginners, but mostly higher levels and closer to the pro level. That's what's exciting for me. There's nobody with a brain in bodybuilding coaching. All the guys with brains went to sports science and strength and conditioning. So it left the door open for me to get involved in that. So I've been coaching and training higher level bodybuilders for about 8 years now, and that's the majority of what I do. We don't really advertise that a whole lot because that's not great for selling gym memberships and getting personal training sales in a small town, Salem, Oregon. So, but if you don't know, that's a little bit about what I do. And now here's my friend with the PhD.
He kind of sells the PhD. I got to tell you, students like Alex have grown me as a professor over the years because they've brought things and they brought questions to the class, I think, which is what's most important. Because when I started college, I was actually a mine engineering major. I was going to work in mine reclamation. I went to West Virginia University, great school for mining, and found that I had a few professors that just didn't do it for me. The industry kind of collapsed at that point, and now with electric cars, the coal industry is even worse in the state of West Virginia. Shifted to geology, and it wasn't until my senior year in my field camp experience that I even was introduced to exercise physiology. And I had a student that said, it really sounds like what you want to do is this. And so I got my master's at West Virginia, worked in the field for a number of years before getting my PhD. But at the time, and I was just talking with another former student earlier today about this, when I got into exercise science, everything was cardio and cardiac rehabilitation, corporate fitness. And it wasn't as much of a focus on strength and a healthy approach. What I would say now is a healthy approach to body composition. It was do cardio, and we got into this mentality, you got to lose weight, you got to just do cardio. And it was about 3 or 4 years ago, I went to one of our conferences, and they were honoring a bunch of the senior fellows from the American College of Sports Medicine. And I looked at these guys, old guys, really old guys. These guys in their 80s. And I'm looking at these guys. I'm 58, going on 59 now. And I'm looking at these guys and it's like, I don't want to look like that when I'm in my 80s. They're kind of kyphotic, they're bent over, they're shuffling. And it's like, what's the problem here? Because these are exercise professionals. And it dawned on me that these are the same people who were promoting, just diet and cardio for your cardiovascular health. And the approach was, as you age, you're shifting more to doing more cardio type of exercise as opposed to lifting weights. And I've really shifted as I've aged and I've seen what my body needs to needing guys like Alex to give me a little bit more coaching and instruction in terms of, what works weightlifting wise. And my focus has shifted a lot more in that direction. It's helped a lot more with body composition. And I've also found that I can do more because I have more of that muscle mass to go along with it. And so it's a continued journey trying to learn what to do, what is best. But I feel like I'm getting closer. Maybe before I retire, I might know enough to maybe call myself. Huh?
When do you retire? Do we have a minute?
Huh?
When do you retire?
Oh, when do I retire? Yeah. When I have enough money, which is probably when they carry me out. And
you should be all right.
I don't know that I can necessarily retire. And I actually have no desire to retire until I stop learning or until I become what I would consider incompetent in my field. Then I want to keep teaching. But there's so much growth and there's so much opportunity. There's so much we don't yet know. But I don't want him to sell himself short saying that, he doesn't know much or whatever. The guy knows a lot, and I've learned a lot from him and continue to learn. I don't know, just been several times I've called on you for recommendations on stuff. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, I have a very new approach, I think, to exercise where I consider more than just cardio. When I diet, I'm looking a lot more at just simply cutting my calories. I'm looking at what am I eating, how am I exercising, when am I eating. And one thing that I generally teach my students is that about half of the battle of improving body composition is your caloric balance. How much you bring in versus how much you take out. If you can attack that with some success, you're going to be successful. Next is going to be kind of your macro. And we'll talk a bit about how much protein, carbohydrates, and fats. But you kind of get that all honed in. It doesn't matter where that's coming from per se, until you start refining your goals a little bit more, and then you start kind of turning the dials in. And it's kind of this adjusting, multiple controls to hone in on, what's going to make you successful. And then you start looking at maybe nutrient timing and, everything else. And it gets more and more refined the more and more you get closer to those more ultimate goals. And, when you're, working in a strength competition or bodybuilding competition, those are much more important. But for the most of us that are just kind of looking to stay healthy, to improve our bodies so that we can live longer and live healthier, a lot of it is just basic principles, and most of it is just doing the hard work. I don't know, you wouldn't have been in the class where I had a student who asked me, I have a client keeps saying she doesn't want to lift weights because she doesn't want to get big bulky muscles. What do you say to that person?
Reality check.
Yeah.
Your reality check is what we'll give you.
Usually in the past I've always kind of gone into the whole physiological explanation of hormones and gender differences and all that other kind of stuff. But this day I was just kind of in a particularly ornery mood, and I just said, tell her she's just not willing to put the work in. And the more I thought about it, it's like that's the reality, because for most of us, you got to put a lot of work into building that muscle, right? And if you don't put the work in, you're not going to get big, bulky muscles. And if you're that person who, when you pick up a weight, and you're a little bit more of that than I am, but you pick up a weight and the muscle grows, that's great. You don't have to do as much if you don't want those big muscles. And Alex, we were talking last week about, my shift in what I'm doing exercise-wise is definitely much more different than him. Being somebody who is, a strength athlete over 300 pounds, you're not going to try and maintain that into your 60s, 70s, and 80s, because you're going to just beat up your body if he hasn't already beat up his body, which he's explained the numerous
shoulder
tears and injuries
guys.
And everything. So, there's always a bit of a shift in what you're doing, but it's a matter of the goals and what you need to accomplish. So.
Well, and I think when we start talking about food, and I'm gonna ramble through this. This is a presentation from 2 years ago. We're gonna get through it pretty quickly, because I think what we really spent the most time and had the most fun on last time that's helpful for everybody is the Q&A. So the first thing before I say the ABCs, and I'll run through that, is your relationship with food. And to make everybody feel good, I'll tell you my relationship with food, and then nobody will feel bad about theirs. I was in a drive-through. I was a big kid. I was like in a kindergarten class. I'm like a foot taller and like 100 pounds heavier than every kid. So I've been big my entire life. I was 300 pounds when I was 15. I have a propensity to gain, muscle, and that's good. But I also have a propensity to gain fat and put on size that way too. So I got to be kind of careful with it. But I was in a drive-through with my grandma at McDonald's, and all my little skateboard friends are in the back of the Honda, and my grandma asks, "What do you want to eat?" And I said, "I don't want anything." She says, "Why don't you want anything?" I said, "Because I'm fat." And she said, "Honey, you're not fat. It has high protein. You're okay." It's like, okay. So I ordered a double quarter pounder of cheese, some French fries, and I was good to go. And I'm like 9 years old, right? So my grandma, in our house, we were taught to eat when we're bored, when we're happy, and when we're sad. And if you cover bored, happy, and sad, there's not a whole lot left. I don't eat when I'm pissed off for the most part, but that makes it to where I'm eating all the time. And so I was raised on that. So my relationship with food is for comfort. It's as kind of like a stress component and as a coping mechanism. Because what I think is probably the most interesting thing we're going to say today is that you don't realize this dopamine cycle that's happening in your head. You get it from drugs, you get it from sex, you get it from food. And so what happens is if you're able to quickly give yourself a Twinkie and get this little shot of dopamine to go inside of your brain, that's all you need to lower your motivation. Your brain is like, okay, I don't need to do shit now. I'm good. I can just sit here. So it lowers that motivation factor behind exercise, behind savings. So when we're really talking about diet and training principles, my whole purpose now that I'm not an athlete is that I think all these principles carry over to everything we do outside of fitness. This is how I'm going to work. This is how I'm going to be a husband, a father, all those things, how I'm going to run my business with the efficacy, the discipline of what I can do with this. So for some of you guys, I have Sally in the back. My business manager, Sally, is the opposite of me physiologically, also mentally as well. She's not a foodie. She doesn't crave, you might have a snack. Oh my goodness, right? So that's somebody who is the opposite of me, who I'm eating for emotions and feelings and this feel-good sort of a thing. That person is great. She's going to be able to diet and focus on something a lot better than maybe somebody like me. I was listening to a podcast 2 days ago, and I'm starting this crash diet for surgery where I'm going to drop like 20 pounds really quickly. It sounds like a lot. I'm 300 pounds, so 20 pounds for me really is like, 10 pounds for you guys in a couple weeks. It's quick, but it's not drastic. I'm not starving. I'm eating 4,000 calories a day, and my body's rapidly dropping weight. So, and that's like starving kind of for me.
You just pissed off everybody in the room.
Except for Seth. Seth, this guy's the only person here that can out-eat me. You ever see a track athlete or a swimmer? These people can eat an immense amount of food. So I think before you're going to look at what you're going to need to do for dieting, you're going to have to look like, well, be honest. Like, what sort of relationship do you have with food? I'm a fat shit. I like to eat food. If it's around, I will eat it. I get home every night. I start to relax and unwind. I get the munchies. I want to go for food. And I'm in this habit. There's this neural pathway that is so strong in my brain that as soon as I get home, my body knows what we're doing. Cool, we lifted weights. We go home. We relax. And we're going to start eating some junk food. So I think that the first thing for you is to just kind of take a mental note, watch what you tend to do. You're like, I don't eat breakfast. So you're not using food for fuel or energy. I like to eat at nighttime. I like to drink at this time. So depending on how you're using food, I think kind of makes the biggest difference for everybody. Anything you want to kind of add to that?
No, I think you captured that pretty good. I think, everybody's going to be a little bit different, and you have to kind of look at your own circumstances and your habits and what your lifestyle is when you really start to begin to plan how you're going to eat. Because if you try and fit yourself into the same mold that Alex would use to lose weight or that I would use, you're going to probably fail because you're different than us. I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody comes to me with kind of basic questions. How much protein should I eat? I don't know. I don't know you. I don't know what you eat. I don't know if you're allergic to beef or anything like that. So the other one that I get is, people having trouble losing weight, wanting to understand how to lose weight. Typically, if I was going to go through and tell people right away how to lose weight, the first thing I'd say is that your body probably isn't talking to itself very well. And so this term that I used kind of more for a marketing strategy a couple of years ago was called physiology hacking. You hear the word hacking and you think that means like a shortcut or you're cheating or you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. It's a good way to sell it so that people want to hire me. But the biggest thing is that when I examine the sequence of what somebody's doing, so Phil in the back is doing a transformation challenge with me. I have him track his food and tell me what he's doing or what he's not doing. Well, all these stuff are feedback loops. So the presence of something or the absence of something is going to cause a certain change in your body. So if I add something in, my body does something. If I pull something out or if my body doesn't have it, it's also going to another sequence of actions and reactions. So for me, I have everybody track their stuff really quickly to figure out what's out of sequence. Like, okay, I'm binge eating at nighttime. I'm not eating breakfast. I'm eating every 6 hours. My blood sugar drops on the floor. I'm insulin sensitive because I have all these foods at nighttime when my blood sugar should be low as I'm going to bed. Just an example. So the biggest thing for somebody is just to kind of track those habits so we can see, because if I'm big, I told my body to be this way by doing these things over and over for years and years. So I look at those things for everybody and I figure out, okay, what's inefficient in this sort of equation there, and trying to get the body to talk to itself the right way. When you want to know about what foods to eat, and that's the thing that everybody comes to me with, what should I be eating? And I see what they are eating, like, that shit's bad for you, right? Like, that beer is bad, that the burger or that the cheese or the donut or whatever it is bad. So the first thing I'll say is like, well, you might not know what to eat on the exact gram and ounce, but I don't need to tell you that you need 4 ounces of chicken and you need 35 grams of carbohydrates with sweet potato. You need to know, like, hey, just put the cheeseburger down, right? So I'm looking at you because you're in the front of me. Don't worry. I'm not like targeting you as a cheeseburger. You look great. You look very fit. So I think when we're looking at what food you should eat, it's like, what shouldn't I eat? Okay, and then the basics of what to eat is I'm looking for whole food. So this is a other than the name of a store, this is a thing that is kind of in all diets, other than maybe if it fits your macros sort of dieting. And we'll explain that maybe later if somebody asks a question about if it's good to do that diet or not. But I think the biggest thing is whole foods. You want things that are processed as little as possible. If you look on the back and you see the ingredients and there's like 35 things that are on that, and realistically you're just looking for like 1 or 2 simple ingredients. So we have to kind of get back to that stuff. And I'll be honest with you, it's all the shit that doesn't taste good. If it tastes good, likely it's probably bad for you, or it has too much fat, or it's got some sort of additive going into it that's going to kind of screw you. So if it tastes good, you probably can't eat it. But I also would challenge everybody that's where, when I was meal prepping like probably 10 years ago, all my food tastes like shit. I mean, I burnt my chicken on a foreman every single day. I had overcooked rice. I didn't really care because I was just trying to diet, for performance purposes. So I'd say it's probably a little bit better if you can learn how to cook, like just enough to make it palatable. Or hire a meal prep company. That's kind of the cheat sheet nowadays for everybody. But when we're talking about what to eat, we want to get away from processed foods. I'm not going to say it's more fruits or vegetables, or it's more animal-based proteins, or it's these types of carbs. It's all of it. All of it's good. But it's going to be that we have to get away from stuff that comes out of packages. And honestly, stuff's so expensive anyways that by the time you end up, if you were to stop spending money on the crap food and then you go to a meal prep company that looks kind of expensive, it probably would end up being less money by the time you're done with it. Because whenever I eat out or whenever I'm trying to buy something that's quick, it's always expensive. And
we have a lot more waste too, I think, when we prepare food. Or we should have some waste.
I don't have a lot of waste at all. Yeah, I don't really have much at all.
I have kids that we end up throwing away a lot of food because they don't eat it all.
Macros. Should I talk about macros? Tell them what they are?
Sure.
Okay. Macros is a very big, fitness is such a fad in the last 10 years between CrossFit and Instagram. Like everybody has some information in front of them. And so you'll hear macros or macro-based dieting. It's really basic, other than maybe we could call alcohol a macro for some people, because is that technically a macro?
No, we had that discussion, Corbin and I, last week, and I wouldn't call it a macro because it's non-nutritive. It's really those three basic areas, the protein, carbohydrates, and fats, that supply us with the healthy energy and the nutrients that we need. So, yeah, you get energy from alcohol. But as soon as you make it a macro and people start saying, I'm tracking my macros, I got to have 3 beers today. It's probably, if it is a macro, it's one of those macros that we should kind of just push off to the side.
Yeah, probably not count it.
And not focus on it, but not from the
red wine's
standpoint.
Really healthy for you, though. I can have that, right?
Yeah, it's like a glass of red wine is equivalent to going to the gym, they say.
Close.
Except you don't burn the 150 calories, you consume it.
Well, the interesting thing, and if you guys, this is a quick snippet about alcohol, is I remember reading when I was probably 18 years old, that's right around the time of getting into competing, I read a study from Harvard about alcohol, and it basically says, hey, when alcohol is in your system, it can't really synthesize protein well, it doesn't regulate carbohydrates, everything you're doing, because it thinks it's poison. On a micro level, your body's poison anytime you drink booze. So it shuts down everything for you. So anything that you're eating, even if it's healthy, even if it's clean, it's going to go mostly towards fat storage, and your body's not going to regulate repair. For me as an athlete, like I said, I would die 20 years earlier to be more competitive at that age. And so when I found out that it could decrease my performance for 3 to 5 days, and that's just like on having a couple drinks. Now, am I saying if you have a couple drinks that you're going to be a shitty athlete for 3 to 5 days? No. But at the time where it's like pay, play, or go home, I was like, okay, anything that makes a difference. And I'm in college. I'm at Western, so all there is to do is to drink, So I stopped drinking completely. I didn't have a drop of alcohol from like 18 to 21. Which worked out well for competing, but that's one of the first things that I'll have people pull out, especially as people get a little bit older, things start to slow down. Alcohol is going to be probably one of your bigger hindrances if it's there on like a more of like a daily level. Like if you were drinking like I have X drinks like daily, like yeah, you're kind of screwed. Your body's not going to be able to regulate any of its functions. So that's just kind of a snippet on like why not to drink. I probably drink more now than I ever have in my life, and that's because like a couple times a year it's fun to get sauced and go do something with my team or my friends, but in general, as far as like frequency, like I try to keep alcohol like to basically nothing, because I know that in the diet, especially for how I eat, when I eat all the extra food at night, like if I was a boozer too, I'd be screwed. But your 3 main macros, we've got carbohydrates, so that's fast energy, okay? It's got about 4 calories per gram. That doesn't necessarily matter. You don't have to remember that, but you've got fast energy. Your body needs something right now. You need to run, you need to do something, you need to work out. Carbohydrates are what you need. You've got fats. That's a longer digesting, more sustainable energy source. It's going to bring you through a longer activity. It's better at certain times of the day. It's going to be slower digesting, kind of give you more of a satiated fullness most of the time. So like imagine eating beef versus eating white fish. It's going to kind of leave you with that full feeling there. Then you've got protein. And the thing that kind of bothers me maybe about protein is when it's like, hey, it's 4 calories per gram. But if I told you that I'm eating 2,000 calories a day, and if I was eating 2,000 calories of protein, that is something totally different. Like there's no real physical energy to that. The only gasoline that your body's getting nutritionally is that carbohydrate and is that fat. Now, if you're starving, your body can muscle waste, and it can use your protein stores, so your muscle tissue to fuel itself. It can use protein in the lack of, carbohydrates and fats, but the biggest thing is that protein really isn't energy. So even when you see calories and you're looking at your tracker or whatever, the calories that are coming from protein, like it's not really real. I always like call it kind of like the calories that come from green vegetables. Your body's not going to do a lot with them because the priority is mostly going to be around carbohydrates and fats. Favorite macro?
Favorite macro?
Of course, because you had like a whole 5-page thing. You guys were going to hear about big words that we couldn't understand about it. It's got to be carbs. It has to be carbs.
I hate carbs because carbs, I've come from much more of a physiology that carbs tend to make me more fat, certain carbs.
Yeah.
So if I have to pick a carb, I mean, I can eat broccoli anymore till I'm blue in the face or maybe green in the face, but because it fills me up and, there's good healthy benefits to it, but it doesn't kind of contribute to my waistline as much. But I would get.
Do you think your body's gotten conditioned? Do you have like lower caloric intake, like lower carb intake? Would you say?
I generally are a more moderate.
So you're not starved?
No, I'm
definitely
not.
Do you have meals where
starved.
you skip carbs throughout the day?
No.
Okay.
I never skip.
So what's happening there, and we're going to go into this, is because he has equal amounts of carbohydrates throughout the day, he has a stable amount of insulin and blood sugar being produced. So his body is not in a stress state. It's in this fed state kind of all the time versus having this massive spike and this massive drop in energy. And that's where I think most people are probably bad with carbs because they're getting this carbohydrate and insulin sensitivity because they're either dumping carbs in certain windows and they're typically going to be bad carbs because people are kind of scared. Like the 90s killed us for being scared of carbohydrates with an Atkins diet. And so everybody thought that you have to pull carbohydrates to be able to lose fat. When realistically, for my contest prep diets with bodybuilders, the majority of what I do is a lower fat, very high carb, moderate to high protein diet. And that seems to work out really well. And then I think probably the first time was maybe in his classroom or maybe it might have been Kelly's sports nutrition. And they start telling you like, hey, carbohydrates are the key, especially for athletes. Like, Seth, what do you eat for carbohydrates like when you're in like a heavy training cycle?
Oh man, anything from like pasta's huge, pasta's big, anything where you can get. Usually my lunches and dinners, primarily breakfast is big. Breakfast is
like how many carbs? Like how many carbs are calories? I just want to scare people.
How many carbs are calories? So if I eat, I'll probably eat in competition, I'll eat anywhere from 7,000 to 75,000 or 7,500 and probably 3 or 4 of the carbs.
3,000 to 4,000 calories of carbohydrates. Right? I had some friends that were elite swimmers and some track athletes. These are guys that have like high physical output, a lot of burn. And I was kind of the same way. My average diet when I was gaining and when I was competing was about 8,000 calories a day, sometimes upwards of 10, but I was being an ass when I would get 10,000 calories. 6,000 to 8,000 when it's like 3/4 clean food and then some extra like maybe like, we'll call them like macro dense where like this thing only weighs like 60 grams, but it's got like 1,000 grams of carbohydrates or calories in it. So when I was in his classroom, I'm kind of in the same phase of what Seth is still doing now competing is that I knew I needed a lot of carbohydrates. And that's the opposite of what I had heard because I just knew that carbohydrates made you fat and we shouldn't have them. And if I want to lose weight, I pull all the carbohydrates. And that's probably the number one thing when I get bodybuilders that are working with other coaches and they're not able to dial themselves into contests and they can't get lean enough, typically they starve their bodies, they don't have enough carbohydrates. And so one of the first things that I'll do with starving people, Phil, I'm picking on you in the back, is they'll start to increase their carbohydrates, right? So that's kind of one of like my favorite things to focus on for that. The next slide is kind of what I call the 80-20 rule of nutrition. That if you were gonna kind of mess around and not take any parts of your nutrition seriously, but if there was like 3 things that you had to do, like these are like you have to do them, is what you eat in the first thing in the morning, and what you eat before your workout, and what you eat after your workout. My opinion is that that's gonna have the greatest influence on what your body does. Obviously, me eating 3,000 calories at night, my body's gonna store more fat, that has an influence, but if you're looking for performance, recovery, what's gonna tell my body what to do, I'd say those are like those 3 windows. So for me and all my clients and athletes, I'm looking for meal 1, the first thing I eat within the day, to be, and I don't know if this might have changed for you, so I'm curious what your meal timing is. We can look at that in a second.
Sure.
But meal 1 for me is going to be within about 20 to 30 minutes of waking up, depending on the person. I can't tell you that your metabolism is going to be 15% faster or 12% faster if you eat first thing in the morning, but dependent on the individual, gender, age, hormones, a bunch of different stuff, you are going to have a greater metabolic effect from eating first thing in the morning. The second thing is that pre-workout meal. I'm usually training or eating about an hour before I'm going to train. depending on the food, depending on the person, digestion, what that looks like. I have some people that'll eat 30 minutes before a workout, and that's going to be fine for them. I have some people, usually typically women, depending on how their digestion is, that they're going to need a little bit longer to digest food before a workout. But you got to think that when you're coming into the gym, when you're doing something physical, you're racing around a track, okay? So when's the last time that we didn't put gasoline into a car before we raced it around the track? So one of the biggest things that I can fix on somebody is to start giving them, the right amount of energy before that workout. And then post-workout, you've got this awesome window where your body has no idea if you are working out or if you're getting chased by a lion. There's no difference. All it knows is we are very stressed out and you're doing some crazy shit to my body. So within about 20 or 30 minutes, your body wants something, right? It's going to want carbohydrates. It's going to want fast, easily digestible, absorbable protein. This is kind of where the protein shake probably got famous, right? And maybe even a little bit overused. I think I used to have like 3 or 4 protein shakes a day. And so
Still kind of do, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm on a 6-meal plan. So I always talk about, first breakfast, second breakfast, first lunch, second lunch, and so on.
How many do you have shakes each day?
Yeah.
How many of those do you have?
I usually have 3.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's convenience. I mean, with my schedule, I might be jumping into
No, you're fine.
your question a little too early, but since I live in Tualatin and teach at Mama, so I have a bit of a commute. I have, my high school age son goes to West Salem High School, and we don't have a bus from where we live in Tualatin because we're in the school district, but we don't have a bus. So I have to drive him there every morning, plus then go to campus. To get kids up and going in the morning. I want my wife to have time to work out. So my workouts are usually going to be anywhere from about 4:30 to 5:30 in the morning. And I don't have time to kind of get up, eat something well before the workout and work out. So I have to kind of eat afterwards, and I need something that's going to be quickly assimilated into my body, get that protein in there, get some carbs in. So it's usually for me it's a whey protein with, I usually put almond milk in it just because there's fewer calories, then I get some flavor to it. I could use water, but it's kind of boring. And then, depending on kind of my caloric needs, whether I'm trying to gain weight, maintain weight, or lose weight, certain quantity of blueberries always fit good in there. And then I like to use, for me, a greens powder because I can get a lot more nutrients in there without necessarily boosting up my calories. And so I get probably a lot of vegetables throughout the day, sometimes in powder form, but mostly it's going to be in a more natural form. So that's kind of my post-workout. So I'm having that probably about 6 in the morning. Then I travel to campus, and I usually bring my second breakfast with me, and that's going to be egg whites, broccoli.
Yum. Egg whites and broccoli.
Yeah.
Shit.
Some chicken.
The smell of that in a classroom, there's nobody that wants to be in this class.
Well, I don't
you're
eat
teaching remotely. So no, you're not. You're not teaching remotely anymore.
Not anymore. It was a lot easier to eat when I was teaching remotely. But and then some chicken in that. So that gives me my quantity of protein that I need. A good lean source of protein, good source of carbohydrates that are going to kind of last through the day. If I need more carbs, usually some, an apple or something like that. If I'm in a phase where I'm trying to mass a little bit what I can mass, usually, I'm able to eat a little bit more like oatmeal or something like that. I really like to eat. I'm a very simple person when it comes to food, and I'm also very cheap in terms of my food purchases. And then, I'm going to have another shake probably either between classes or somewhere in there, because again, I don't have time to sit down when I teach at 10 o'clock and a 12 o'clock class to really eat much. So I'll grab a quick shake, and it's usually the same as what I did kind of in the morning.
Is that 25 grams or 50 grams?
For me, I think it's about 32 or 34 grams based on my body weight. I personally do about 1 gram per pound of body weight. So it's somewhere in that neighborhood. And that's an easy rule for me. I don't know if you use a different number, but it's maybe more than I need, but it's definitely not too much more than I need. And so it's just simple math. I don't want to have to pull out a calculator and say, what's 0.8 times 219 pounds or something like that. It's just it stays pretty
Phil's
simple.
trying to find ways to eat less food on my plan. So if you're you went to school longer than me. So if you say 25, Phil's got a 1 scoop protein shake. Really quick, right? Really quick.
50 to 32.
Well, but it depends on how many, I'm doing 6 servings of protein throughout the day too. So it really depends on what's that total that you need for the day. Yeah, and I like to keep it, I don't know how you divide it up, but I just even portions of protein throughout. And then my carbohydrates tend to fluctuate based on when I'm training. So I like to have the largest amount of my carbohydrates right around my workouts. So I think right now I'm at somewhere around 85 grams, kind of in that window right after working out. So
Yeah.
a little bit higher than usual.
Well, and I'll tell, like, really quickly, like, we'll go through and do this, like, quick slide on carbs. So what I do with the majority of my clients is we do something called steady state carb intake. And basically what we're doing is we're taking carbohydrates and we're equally dividing them out into, usually within the first 4 to 6 meals. All of my nutrition plans are 6 meals. Some of them are 5 meals when I'm first acclimating somebody to a new plan. They're not used to eating that often. Phil and I are acclimating right now to eating 5 to 6 times a day. Originally, what did you eat, like twice a day or something, right?
And I used to wake up at 5, go to CrossFit, work my butt off, and eat at 10 o'clock, and I was fine with that, and gain muscle and do great. So and never had that, or not eat until lunch and have coffee.
Yeah.
And now he's like, you better eat. And I'm going,
So Phil did something, when we talk about efficiency, we use that word. Phil has a very efficient metabolism, but for our purposes, it is now the opposite of efficient, it's now horribly inefficient. His body was able to consume very little food in certain windows and have a very high physical output. That's a pretty efficient car. If you were able to put a very small amount of gasoline in this vehicle, and it'll go 1,000 miles for you. But when it comes down to trying to put on tissue, trying to increase performance, decrease body fat, you're gonna realize what he has to do is he has to basically starve himself and really, really work to get his body to respond. So right now we're doing kind of like a quick metabolic reset where I'm trying to force his body to get used to this food as quickly as possible. In his last check, you're like, hey, I'm still not used to the food intake. Well, we fixed some math, so now we're calculating everything properly, which is pretty tough because calculating carbohydrate measurements is kind of tough. But the other thing is that now I think that your body is going to be able to kind of get used to something a little bit more normal. So when I'm talking about efficiency, I want a body that can be able to rip through as much food as humanly possible. So like my body would be very efficient. I can rip through 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, which is the opposite of that one. But it has a great help for me putting on muscle, for recovery, strength, and performance gains, especially fat loss, because I can eat a lot more food and have a lot less physical output and burn much more fat because my body is very efficient at doing it kind of for itself. So when we're looking at carbohydrates, I want to have those steady state carbs. And for me, I basically take an equal amount of carbohydrates and I divide them out amongst 4, 5, or 6 meals. But let's say I'm going to pick on an athlete, so I've got set. When you talk about higher amounts of carbohydrates in these training windows, that does work really well, and that's something that I use for general population people. I have their energy needs, and I divide protein, carbohydrates fairly equally throughout the day. I give them fats in the morning because your body has a greater ability. It's hungry. When you get up, if you'll eat first thing in the morning, and even though your body might not be used to it, it doesn't take more than a couple days before your body starts to kind of get the hang of what's going on. I like fats before we work out. But what I would do with somebody like him is once I got his body up to where it's used to all these carbohydrates in its steady state, I'd start thinking, hey, where can I get away with dumping carbohydrates in more important windows? And those more important windows are going to be, what is he eating before he works out? What's he eating after his workout? So for most of my clients now, once I get their metabolism, like I call it like healed or fixed, I get it up to a certain point. Then I start to stack more carbohydrates around their workouts. For some people, let's say Hope, you've got, yeah, I get to pick on you. I know you. That's what I'm weird. I married Hope, by the way. Yeah. No, I didn't marry Hope. I was her, like the guy who marries them. Yeah. Actually, I didn't marry anybody. So I didn't marry Hope. Sorry. Ashley's pissed. I'm in trouble. So let's say we've got this person who doesn't necessarily have a large amount of carbohydrates, but maybe 25 grams of carbs. I'm just making up a random number. Sounds good for one of these meals. So she can have that on her low meals, but I'm going to give her just a little bit of an extra, like maybe an extra 10 grams of carbs before and after the workout. These are windows where calories almost kind of disappear. Like if I'm eating something and I'm about to go race around the track, my body is going to use that energy. The likelihood of storing those calories into fat is like next to nothing. Same thing, I get done, I've gotten chased by a lion, I come inside, I start throwing Gatorade or Twinkies, whatever those carbs are going to be. Not Twinkies. Not Twinkies, but I start throwing those carbohydrates in. My body rapidly wants to restore everything that I emptied in these gas storage muscles, so that's these, right? So I think that whether you're going to do steady state carb intake or you're going to front load carbs around your workouts, probably one of the most important things is that you're not, especially in the middle of the day, doing something where maybe you have no carbs. Where you have no carbohydrates, because that's where you start to create these inefficiencies. Your body's going to get used to no calories, your insulin, your blood sugar is going to drop on the floor, and then all of a sudden 5 o'clock, boom, I've got 80 grams of carbs, I'm trying to work out. So we're creating sensitivities, but also more inefficiency along the way. So that's kind of the quick gist on carbs. Eat more of them, eat them equally throughout the day. Maybe experiment that you might feel better performance-wise having more before or more after the workout. But in general, if you're kind of just getting started, we just want to take your energy and just put it throughout the day. You had mentioned about protein, keeping protein pretty equal throughout the day. I'm a pretty big proponent of also keeping protein very even throughout the day. If I have higher performance athletes, I'll give them a little bit more in the morning. Their body seems to digest a little bit more in that, and they break their fast. And I'll give them a little bit more in their post-workout, but it's just a little bit. And what I kind of think of is it's like this drip feed of amino acids going into the bloodstream. And so same as insulin and blood sugar, for all these foods, if I can just keep them pretty level, that's going to work out pretty well for you. Number one question I always get is like, how much protein should I be intaking? And I think that this is like a very layman's average. If I just had to cheat sheet it, I didn't know you, I know you, I married you, is that women tend to do pretty well. I use animal-based protein sources on this, so I said 3 to 4 ounces of cooked meat, but between about 15, 25 grams of protein. All of women whose bodies are very sensitive to digesting protein, they're not used to it, they don't have a high protein intake. So right now my grandma has heart failure. I wrote a diet for her that I felt was like pretty sustainable. She's always been very high protein, and she says if you get 60 grams a day, you're getting enough protein. And that was her number. She heard that in like the 50s and just has repeated it ever since. So when I was a kid, I just knew that if you got 60 grams of protein, you could grow muscles, you'd be good. So for her, I have her on a diet plan where she has about 15 to 20 grams of protein per day. She doesn't have great digestion. She's pretty overweight. She's close to 80 years old, and that seems to work pretty well. I also had a Olympia, which is a like Super Bowl of bodybuilding figure competitor from a couple years ago. She probably only weighed about 135 pounds, and she had the ability to digest around 6 ounces of cooked meat per meal, and she could just rip through it. So when it comes to protein digestion, I think the biggest thing is it's really going to depend on you. Your body's used to a certain amount. Like my buddy back there that I keep picking on, Phil, his body wants to only digest likely maybe 4 ounces of cooked protein. And I'm giving him a whopping 5, which is less than I'd start any guy on, but I'm starting him off at 5 because his body still thinks that that's a lot of protein, and it has been kind of hard to get used to eating that. But now that we have the carbs fixed, we should be fine there. So when it comes to protein, I can't necessarily tell you should have exactly this many grams, exactly this many ounces. Marilyn, who's one of my clients back there, she's on my diet plan year round, and I always have a range. Because if your body can and will digest a little bit more protein, that's not a bad thing. Typically, people aren't getting fat on protein, they're getting fat on carbohydrates and fats. If you forced your body to eat too much protein, it would do the same thing that it does with extra carbs and fats, and it would want to go and store all of that extra protein as fat storage. But I think the biggest thing is that you'll find that your body does or doesn't digest it. So I write a meal plan for Marilyn. I say, hey, eat 5 ounces of chicken. And she's like, I'm bloated. I can't go to the bathroom. I'm sick. I just don't want to eat that next meal. Oh, that's an easy indication. Maybe we have a little too much protein. So for all of my female clients especially, I always have kind of a flexible range. And based on appetite, digestion, how they're feeling, I think that their body will kind of calibrate itself. But I do tell them there's like minimums. It's like, hey, you need at least maybe 3 cooked ounces of this, but you could have us up to 4.5 ounces, something like that. So for protein, that's going to kind of be up to you to find what will your body actually tolerate. Guys tend to digest a little bit more protein. So for here on the sheet, if you guys got any of them, I've got general population for most males around 5 to 6 ounces. That's a pretty good portion to start. Like if I didn't know you and I was just going to start dieting you and you're a guy, I'd probably give you 5 or 6 ounces of cooked protein. It likely would be, just fine. If you're hungrier and your appetite allowed, I'd increase it. If 6 ounces was too much, I'd say, Mark, I'm sorry, bring it down to 5 ounces.
6 ounces every day.
Well, and then for me, so this is, I used to be a lot bigger, and I conditioned my body to eat about 10 to 12 cooked ounces of protein. Like, that is a ton. I know you were talking about eating a pound of meat. That's like twice a day. I'm talking like 6 times a day, I eat 10 to 12 ounces of like cooked meat. And on raw meat, I think I was eating like 4 or 5 pounds of meat a day. right? And so my body took a long time. My first diet plan ever, it was like 8 cooked ounces, and then slowly it went to 9, and then it went to 10. And I was just a robot. I was just doing what coaches told me. But my body over time was able to increase its ability to digest protein. I took probiotics, I had digestive enzymes. I noticed that my body didn't like certain protein sources at certain times of day. So when it comes to protein, I think part of it's just kind of finding what works best for you. But for some basic numbers, women between 15 to 25 grams of protein in a serving. It really depends on who you are and what your appetite does. Guys, I would say between 30 and 40 grams, maybe a serving would be a decent starting point. There's always going to be somebody that's like, I can only eat 20 grams. I have 1 kidney. Okay, you can only eat 20 grams. You have 1 kidney. Awesome. I can eat, like I said, my girl that could eat 40 to 45 grams of protein, you're going to have that person too. So for protein, I think it's just kind of about finding what works best for you. Any comments?
No, I think you got it.
Okay. I think I'm on my last slide here. So this is a snapshot, and then we can do Q&A. You can ask us weird stuff, anything hopefully exercise related. So I think you have to figure out your food relationship, and you have to develop a strategy that works well for you. I threw a box of muffins away the other day, went out with our friends last night. Tim wanted me to order food. I'm like, no, I'm getting skinny, Tim. I can't eat junk food with you and your tuna salad. So I had a giant steak that came with like crab sauce and stuff on it. So I'm eating clean. So figuring out your relationship with food is going to allow you to develop a better food strategy. I think if we pull the junk food, that's likely what's causing you guys the most grief is the crap that you're eating or that you're drinking. Number one thing, I feel like people drink calories, and that's my first rule when I get a normal person. I said, hey, if your drink has calories in it, just throw it out. Right? Are you cold?
Yeah.
Okay, fair. All right. Is it cold here?
It's the vent right, but
Okay. Move one to the left. I'm like sweating my butt off up here. So I'm like, really? Are you actually that? So we pulled the junk food. We start implementing whole foods and seeing how that does and how that makes you feel. You get your meal timing down because I will have people, and Marilyn was a bodybuilder. She had a coach before me, and the first thing that I get when I get new clients is I start to fix their meal timing within the same macros that they're doing. It is insane to see how much more efficient the body can be and will do things for you when the schedule and the meal timing of everything is lined up. And this is like same caloric intake, really not a whole lot different other than these kind of meal timing windows. Figuring out the pre-workout, the post-workout, and what you eat for breakfast. If you're just kind of getting into this stuff, that's the basics. And I feel like that's fair because I'm not telling you that you need to eat perfect for dinner or for the other stuff, but I'm saying, hey, what do you put in your body in the morning and put fuel in it? What do you put in your body before you exercise? And then is there something going in your body afterwards that's going to give you some sort of recovery to help you for what you just did? And that's it. So easy.
I would add with, when you talk about getting rid of the junk food, that's really, really hard to do. But
yes,
if you have those things that are really hard to get rid of, make them worth your while when you are going to eat it. You know, like I cannot eat like just that boxed ice cream in the store anymore. I've just trained myself that just is crap. I had no desire for it, and I could say the same.
Were you talking about salt and straw? Was that from the podcast?
I might have talked about salt and straw at some point, but I'm up in Portland. I don't know if they have a salt and straw down here yet or not.
No,
it's really, really good ice cream. And yeah, it's high in calories, but it's not something I do probably more than 3 or 4 times a year. But I'm not going to feel guilty doing that because I'm eating healthy, the rest of the 365 days of the year. I'm not putting something in my body that I'm going to take a couple bites of and it's like, why am I doing this? This is crap, but keep doing it. It's like donuts. I palate donuts anymore. I've just kind of trained myself that I don't care if they're the ones in the little pink boxes. They still suck.
What about the voodoo donuts with the bacon and the
bacon? Okay. Well, I don't eat bacon either. But voodoo donuts, I had those twice, I think, since I've moved to Oregon, and it's like you take one bite and it's just like, this is not worth it. I want something I'm going to enjoy. They give me, a slice of really good cheesecake or something like that, then you're going to enjoy it. But you enjoy it, it gives you that satisfaction. You don't have to eat a lot of it. Try and split it up with somebody if you can. But, and have it something you're going to enjoy and you're not going to feel guilt afterwards. If it's crap that you're eating and you shouldn't be eating and it tastes like crap and you feel guilty afterwards, get it the hell out of your diet and you'll be better for it. It's the same with fast food. I mean, I haven't had the desire for many hamburgers lately, let alone McDonald's. I drive by McDonald's, I want to throw up. It's just a matter of kind of training yourself with what you eat to what gives you satisfaction. I think I was telling you about my former roommate when I lived in New York many years ago. Had a lot of health issues and had things that he couldn't eat. And for him, eating just a baked sweet potato plain, nothing on it, was like candy to him. I mean, he could just literally taste the sugars in it and everything else. And then, when you train your brain to accept foods as healthy and good and delicious, your brain is going to want those and crave those. And when you train it that, that this food is not good for me and you don't like the taste of it, you're going to get further and further away from wanting it. And when you do have it, you're just like, why did I do that? And there should be no regrets with food. That's when we kind of get into those patterns of not eating healthy, is that we're eating stuff that we feel guilty after we do it. But of course, the guilt doesn't stop us from doing it, right? So we just keep doing it. I don't know if there was something else I wanted to cover with that, but I wanted to slip that point in there. So don't, completely, go stoic in your diet and be miserable. Find the things that are going to facilitate you getting healthy and having a consistent
How many years
lifestyle.
did it take you to get to where you're at today?
Well, I'm pretty old, but
58.
I'm trying to think how long it really took.
Everything you said don't eat, I still love to eat. I only eat
Yeah, I mean, I think the dessert stuff, I mean, it's probably been in the last really 10 years.
Okay. So I do have a chance. Okay.
Yeah.
By 60, Phil, we'll be there.
It's just kind of a progressive thing. I mean, the McDonald's.
You used to enjoy those foods before, right?
Yeah.
Well, do you still have a beer every once in a while?
Yeah, beer was the
Okay.
other thing I was going to bring up. I still love beer, but there was a time, I don't know how many years ago it was now, that I let my body fat creep up a little bit heavier than I wanted to, and I got in our bod pod in the lab, and then I got a real number behind it. I was like, holy crap, I got to do something about this. And it wasn't that bad, but it was bad enough for me. It was
What
not.
was it?
I think I was just over 20% body fat. It was just about 240. So I'm about 20 pounds lighter still now, but it just, it's from being too sedentary and, just lifting weights, but eating like I was eating for his body and not my body. And plus just having come to Oregon from Michigan, you kind of embrace all the craft beers in the state of Oregon. And so I decided I gotta start cutting back on calories. And my wife, as supportive as she always is, comes home from the grocery store with a 6-pack of Michelob Ultra for me. And I opened one of those, and it was so bad. I mean, you talk about, something's got to be good if you're going to drink it. It was, 90 calories of just nothingness. And it's like, I can't do this. And so we started looking at what are the calories in beer? And we started researching some of the beers out there. And there was one, I want to say it was like the Nuclear Penguin Imperial Stout or something like that. It has over 100, I think it was over 1,100 calories in a pint. Wow. 1,100 calories. Now you imagine you're a beer drinker, you love your beers.
I drink fruity martinis that the girliest girl would never order, and they don't say anything. They go up and they go to hand the drink to Ashley, and then I say, that's for me, and they, yes it is.
We can talk about the calories in those as well. But so I look at, you think of somebody goes out and they think, oh, that sounds really great, and it's a great tasting beer, not realizing how many calories. And you have a couple of those. First of all, the alcohol content of that was so high that you get behind the wheel of a car after a pint or two. I think it was like 11 or 12%.
Yeah, it's insane.
So we started looking at, the calories, and started noticing that there's much more calories the more the ABV goes up. And started kind of doing some calculations because I'm a bit of a geek like that, and I realized that for a 12-ounce bottle of beer, every ABV is worth about 30 kilocalories. And so of course, you go out, it's a pint in a restaurant, and so I'm constantly doing the math in my head, converting from a pint to 12 ounces back to a pint to get my calories. Not realizing all you have to do is multiply by 40 kilocalories instead of 30, but it was like 30 kilocalories for a 12-ounce beer, 40 for a pint per ABV. So we just started using that as a rule of thumb. We go out and okay, well, this beer has 6% alcohol. What other options do I have that are a little bit lower? And
So you're saying they should take shots?
no, not shots.
Not
Because
shots.
you consume a lot of shots pretty quickly too. But with the beer, just starting to look at like Imperial IPAs and stuff like that have very high alcohol. And again, I've very quickly been able to train myself. I can really taste the alcohol now. It's like somebody put a shot of bourbon in an Imperial if I get something really, really high ABV now. But we kind of just weaned ourselves down to where we found our sweet spot was about 4 to 5, about 4.5 to 5.5% was about the lowest you could find. It still tasted good. And now there's like fractional IPAs and some of these other techniques where they are a lot lower carbs and they actually can taste pretty good at like 90 calories. And so when we go out, I don't deny myself a beer. I just look for what is going to be the better calorie content and have the best taste. I mean, I am not going to go out. I go to a restaurant and say something with a low ABV. Oh, we have Coors Light. I'm like, that's not beer.
Here's some water.
Yeah, just give me a glass of water, right? And so just kind of making those choices. So you can still enjoy that stuff, but you just have to be more careful.
But you also offset it on your meal by other caloric intake of leading less of that by the beer or two that you have.
No.
I usually
Probably
don't.
not.
I don't worry about altering my diet based on my alcohol consumption. I just keep the alcohol really to a minimum. At most, I'll have a few beers a week. When my wife and I do a little kind of daily sit down, we might have a glass or two of wine. Try and avoid that, especially if I'm trying to cut weight. But again, some of that just kind of fluctuates with, what are the caloric goals at the time. If I'm in a maintenance phase, it's a little bit easier to have alcohol and not have too much of it, but not worry about, how it affects my other calories. But when I'm trying to cut weight, cut fat, then I'm going to be much more conscious about the calories that I'm bringing in alcohol. If I'm trying to gain weight, it's not too bad. But still, you don't go binge drinking or any of that kind of stuff.
Well, I think when you're looking at cheat meals or reward systems or what's going to work well for you, like I don't really try to mitigate the damage on a cheat meal. If I'm dieting and I'm doing my thing and I'm eating the chicken and the fish, I'm always training. I mean, I train 5 or 6 days a week for 2 hours for basically the last 20 years. I never don't train. It's just what's going on with my diet. So when I get to that cheat meal, especially, like I just started, like I said, this crash diet, I'm going to get a cheat meal in like 5 or 6 days. It's going to be obnoxious. There will be bodies everywhere. It'll be the craziest cheat meal. I'm not trying to mitigate that damage, but that cheat meal isn't what throws off my plan. Now, if you were trying to figure out how to have a beer every day, would you need to make a caloric allowance for that and make room for it, budget it, if you will, then yes. But it's one of those things that Marilyn, one of my clients, there's no stipulation really on cheat meals other than this is maybe a cleaner one. I usually give my clients about 2 cheat meals a week. One is in midweek around a really hard workout and it's kind of more on the cleaner side of things. I still say, hey, use whole foods, but have some extra carbs and fats, eat something yummy, have a treat. Good job. The one on the weekend is typically, it's like date night, it's something for you. It's something so you can stay on this stupid diet. And most of my clients, because they're bodybuilders, it's a rudimentary kind of rough diet. It's fish and chicken and egg whites and nothing tastes good. It's very boring. So they get a cheat meal like they want it. And when I'm following my diet, I'm kind of the same mind. Now, when we talked about, kind of more of this lifestyle side of things, if I'm just on my body weight is a compound effect on the way that I live, then yeah, I try to kind of maybe make more intelligent decisions on those cheat meals or have a treat that's a little less damaging for me. But if I'm being 110% like an ultra boy and doing everything I'm supposed to do, and when I get to that cheat meal, it's on, I'm eating 5 pizzas and doing that. But that works for me, and I'm not necessarily recommending it. It also works for this part of my brain that is kind of an addict, if you will. And 100%, my relationship with food is probably closer to an alcoholic with booze than it is to I have trouble eating. It really is a pretty big problem for me. Luckily, I can train a lot for it and it hasn't hit me. But as I get older, I've even felt my body slow down and my metabolism kind of take a shift from what the hell is this? This is not what I signed up for. Yeah. So on the cheat meals and treats, what? Don't. Questions? Yeah, this is where we get to kind of what?
When, with cheat meals, now would you suggest suggest, allow, or recommend cheat meals for persons like myself who are not in any kind of competitive mode, not trying to get into a bodybuilding physique or not competing for sport, that are just trying to maintain kind of a more healthier body composition.
I think it probably depends. Like, we go back to the psychology of it. If you're somebody who, like me, I'm trying to live a healthy lifestyle. I'm not competing for anything. I don't get paid to do this or to do that. And for me, I still like that cheat meal. Is that if you gave me like a quarter of a muffin, I'd want a refund, and I'd want like the whole box of muffins. So I think depending on the person, but like for you, is it bad if you're weak and you're a structure guy? You've got this routine. You're in great shape. You have a compound effect that works really well for you. And so if you can maintain that, and every week, like date night, me and the wife, we get a bottle of wine, and like whatever you do, I would say that's probably fine. Then you've got people that like can get away with maybe having a treat every day or some more flexible dieting. Seth? Yeah. We're all at a dinner last night, and Seth's like, dude, I eat X thousand calories of this, X thousand calories of that. I only gained 4 pounds. He's trying to gain weight right now. So on the challenge, how the rest of us are trying to, get skinny and fit, Seth's over there trying to gain weight. So that just kind of shows you that, something's going to be a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, do you think you do well? Do you currently have like a cheat meal a week? What do you do?
I don't call it a cheat meal. I mean, I'm a bit more flexible.
You polite and call it a refeed? I love that.
I don't call it a refeed. I just allow myself a certain amount of flexibility.
Yeah.
And usually for us it's Friday nights, and that was probably a bit more of a COVID thing where you couldn't go out to eat or do any of that. You can't do date night or whatever it might be. And we were trying to support some of the local restaurants, so we do takeout or whatever. And so I can never have a restaurant meal that really matches my
at home
real strict regimen of dieting.
But see, what you're doing is a lifestyle, which is very successful, very healthy for you, and it sounds, it's doing well for you, and it's a lifestyle.
Well, I got a big sweatshirt on. Yeah, and I think I think it needs to be a lifestyle.
Right.
And
diet, it's a lifestyle. I choose to do this, I feel good. You're 58, you're doing sort of well, your colleagues.
Yeah.
I know, this is what you're doing.
And so, when you throw in, that opportunity to kind of cheat when it's your lifestyle, I don't like necessarily calling it a cheat meal, because that can bring some guilt to it.
Yeah.
And it should it should be something that if you're going to do it, go out and really enjoy it, but it should not be something that's just going to destroy all the work that you've done for the week. Now, if you're an athlete, a bodybuilder, a strength athlete, or you're a swimmer, is that what it is? Runner. Oh.
He didn't eat it.
I thought he said swimmer, and I thought surely that guy's not a swimmer. But you're burning a lot of calories, and it's going to offset itself in your training anyhow. But also, your body is probably more starved for calories than you really think it is. And so if you're training hard, it's just going to grab onto all those extra calories and use them wisely. But if you're more sedentary like myself, I train, I try to train up to 11 times a week, twice a day, because that's just my schedule. But they're smaller workouts. They're not big, long, strenuous workouts. And so my need to have a lot more carbohydrates following those meals is much smaller than it would be for the three of you. But so my body is going to be a bit more slammed by a whole out cheat meal. If I go out and eat just 2 pizzas or something, which in the past when I was younger I could do, and it was probably a more legit cheat meal for me. But for me now, I look at it as just kind of letting loose of the lifestyle just enough to enjoy myself without really disturbing the goals that I have for myself. But if you're really working out hard, those cheat meals are not going to slam you the way they would if you're, a bit more modern. You're at training.
I can say last night I've cut out. So I don't drink, so that's not a problem for me. And I cut out sugar. I've been sugar for 3 weeks. I literally cut it out. Last night I had a banana cream pie. I had a slice, and it was out of this world. I woke up this morning and I felt hungover.
Yeah, that's sugar.
I was like, my wife.
That's karma. I did that to you. Yeah, it's karma. I did that to you. I knew that last night when I was eating my steak. I was like, you know what? I'm going to give him the shits.
I felt like shit this morning. My wife goes, what's wrong with you? I go, I ate that awesome pie. Because I have not had sugar. Because I shocked my body.
I think he's at a great place where you've got a good set of habits, you've got a routine and a foundation that you're pretty invested in, but you know that it's working because it is working for you. And I think for a lot of us, when we have such bad habits and such bad lifestyles in place and we're trying to look at how to kick those and how to get out of that, yeah, we go from being an asshole with our diet to following a very strict diet. It's not starving, but it's like, hey, here's my rules. And they're rules that you had a hard time following before, because if you've got an iPhone and you drive down the road, you're going to fall into some sort of a bad food, bad habit. It's just too much a part of our culture. In America, food and booze and everything there is such a big part of what we do. And so the ultimate goal is that, like, and I thought about this probably, do you remember when I went through this kick of I wanted to eat healthier, not to lose weight, I just wanted to feel better. It was just the ultimate hippie thing for me. I was like, you know what? I just want to be good, be healthy, and feel good. And so whenever I was eating food, my goal wasn't to follow the diet plan. I just wanted to put something in my body that was healthy. And even when I would eat extra calories, it would be like, okay, I'm having some whole eggs on a piece of toast with like this thing. And so Dr. Armstrong here is in a very sustainable point, and I think that's where we kind of all want to be, where I'm healthy, my weight's balanced out, I have a high physical output, I've got a routine that supports my body, health, energy, brain power, all those good things, and then, you know, there's a treat, or there's some flexibility to that, because it all fits in, because I'm doing such a good job 90% of the time. Our weight, how we feel, where we're at, is going to be a sum of what we're doing 9 out of 10 days per week. So if 9 out of 10 days per week I have a drink, I do this one thing, then I'm not going to be able to have much flexibility from that. So like, you're kind of our exemplar. Aging well. By the way, we're on a podcast right now called Aging Well. That's why this microphone is here.
We're not live yet.
Yeah, we can edit this out.
You have to edit all the custom.
No, we're
I just have to check that box on Apple Podcasts that there's explicit content. Yeah. So I just go ahead and check that all the time, because it's like, who knows when I'm gonna
Jeremy, you got a question?
Yeah. So a little bit ago you talked about nutrient timing in terms of like protein and carbohydrates, kind of steady state throughout the day, maybe a little bit more carbs through like pre and post workout.
Yeah.
What about fat timing, and then what also phyto or micronutrient timing? Is there any? Does that make any difference at all? Like, as long as you're getting it in the day, like, just do it?
I think the micronutrient, what do you think? I think micronutrients for me is kind of throughout the day as like a total thing. I don't think you're going to notice a huge benefit of micronutrients around performance necessarily. Fats, my biggest preference is like my hack sheet for bodybuilders is first thing in the morning and before your workouts. But if I am in like a pretty big fat loss stage, I'm trying to drop, I usually pull the fats to next to nothing. You guys have probably heard that you need to have fats for essential hormone production, for joints, and for all this stuff. Very, very true. What you don't need is caloric fat intake and saturated fats. You do need essential fatty acids. So even when I have bodybuilders or athletes that are on very low fat diets, they still have supplements that give them omega-3, 6, 9, so all your essential fatty acids. So we're not messing with anything that the body does. We're just saying that, hey, we're prioritizing carbohydrates and sustained protein over fats. But if you want to like where to put them, like my first 2 windows is usually first thing in the morning. Your body loves it. And then before the workout, you're going to train harder. You're not going to store those calories. You're going to use up that energy, and you're just going to train a little bit harder. If I'm trying to drop fat, those are the first 2 things that I do, is I pull the fats down to basically nothing. There's still fats in everything. There's fats in your chicken. It's not a fatty protein like beef or salmon or something like that. But I still would say you're getting enough fat in there, especially if you supplement. And even if you do have a high fat intake in your diet, you probably still need to get something with the right amount of essential fatty acids in it.
Yeah, I look the same way. I think, the fat really depends on kind of when you're training too. If you're going to be training in the afternoons when you're getting your carbs, and you have to kind of sustain yourself without eating too many calories throughout the day, the morning is really the best time for fat, because it's going to keep you full. It's going to carry you over until that next workout. But you might have to, like in my situation, I need more carbs in the morning. I have fats throughout the day, but I usually kind of gauge the fats on the total calories. They're kind of the caloric filler. Do I have the protein I need? Do I have the carbohydrates I need? If I still need more calories, then that can be fat. And when you have those is when it's not going to interfere with the absorption of those carbohydrates or the protein.
Like post-workout.
Yeah.
You don't need any fats post-workout. It's just going to mess everything up. So that'd be like the one time not to. If I said not to, I'd probably say not post-workout. And then I have people that drop really well on having fats at nighttime, like maybe for their 5th or their 6th meal right before they go to bed. It sustains their energy throughout the night, and they seem to be in a relaxed state that drops more body fat. Then I have other people that having fats right before bed does the opposite. They go to bed with higher blood sugar, it stays up, they don't digest or work through as much body fat store at nighttime. But if you're like first 2 windows, breakfast pre. But you have to have a high energy need in the morning because you're waking up, you train fasted, right?
Yeah, I have to train fasted.
And then you motor.
Yeah.
So you're kind of already like in debt. So for you to get a bunch of food around there makes sense.
Big argument.
Oh shit.
Real fruit or no real fruit? I'm not talking fruit juice, I'm just talking about eating fruit.
Yeah. Do you want me to do it?
You can do it.
One of the first things I think, especially for my general population clients, I think fruit is great. If you look at the glycemic index, which is how slow or fast a carbohydrate's going to digest and absorb, you look at fruit, the majority of your fruits are very low glycemic, and I'm typically not seeing issues with people that are very overweight from overeating a lot of fruit. I typically like to have it in the morning because it's a faster digesting carb and it's kind of more of a sugarish. And then post-workout is good too. But I've got clients that are general population that we're just kind of doing calories in, calories out. And I like fruit because it's a very easy thing that I could, hey, lady, I need you to have a piece of fruit and a little protein bar at 2 o'clock. You only eat twice a day, but now I'm making you eat 6 times a day and you hate me for it. Eat an apple, eat a protein bar, and that is pretty manageable. So I like fruit. I'm pretty big on like, one of my superfoods is bananas. So post-workout, that's one of those foods that I really think does well for people. That like shot of potassium and the fast digestion of banana is good. But then you look at berries, and berries digest at like, it's the slowest thing. Like you'd have a very hard time getting overweight on like blueberries. Maybe. Anything else?
No, I would agree with that.
Yes.
You talked about insulin levels and glucose levels and the effect of eating carbohydrates and fats at different times of the days. How are you tracking that? Are you just going by how you feel? Or is there are you testing for it?
So if I wanted to be particular, I do have more advanced bodybuilders that are really into seeing what their glucose level is first thing in the morning, throughout the day, and then before bed. And that just kind of gives us a baseline. If we see they're going to bed with low blood sugar and this guy's trying to gain weight, then we want his blood sugar to be up. If we want this person to lose weight, their blood sugar is low before bed, then we know that that's probably a good spot for them. They're going to burn more fat overnight. I think my biggest thing with it is you would not be able to, let's say I wrote a diet for you and I put you on 180 grams of carbs, which is a very common number that I use, and 6 meals of 30 grams of carbs per meal, and I gave it to you, you're like, oh my God, the oatmeal, like I'm dying, I can't poop, I have to poop, like it's just kind of messing you up. That's going to pretty much tell us where you're at with too much or too little carbs. But how I base carbohydrate intake, I do a little bit of looking at a BMR, so like that's all that means is how many calories your body burns at rest, so I'll look at that. But then the other thing is that like if I take how much food you're normally eating and I had you track it for a week, which is what I do with all my new clients, you track it for a week, so I'd say, okay, you're eating approximately 200 grams of carbohydrates a day. Most of them are shitty and they're all in the evening time. So that'd be how I kind of like ballpark. I call it an educated guess, but that's where I would kind of start your carbs at, is using that number in mind. And your body tells us pretty quickly if it's, if it does or doesn't like the amount of food that you're in. Then I look for you. It's like having the answers in the back of a math book when I look over you and I'm like, is that right? I went through and I reread this nutrition thing and I was like, I'm not sure if that's scientifically true. I'm going to take that last one out of there.
Oh, misinformation.
So what would you say for a normal person sits at a desk, has a hard time eating 6 meals a day, to have a sustainable lifestyle, keep their weight off?
She's looking at you. She's not looking at me.
There's a few things you can do. I mean, I still like this 6 meal plan. I just try and that's why, I
But
do
like,
have
what's a
3.
meal? And I think that's where, like, I'm not saying like 6 times get your fork and get your
Yeah.
knife out, because one of your meals happens to be like, this is a 1 scoop protein shake.
No,
and
3
a banana.
meals. I really only have 3 sit-down meals a day. And so that's why I call it, first breakfast, second breakfast, and so on, because I couldn't do that. I couldn't sit down and eat. I mean, my students have enough of a difficulty getting their meals in. And, when you were in school and Dr. H wouldn't let you guys eat in classroom,
me and
that really
Steve.
pissed off all the bodybuilders and stuff and the athletes, because it's like, I gotta eat. And I'm like, I don't care if you eat as long as it's not something that's gonna smell and make me really hungry.
Like Steve Vetter's
Yeah,
fish.
Steve Vetter, yeah. But so I'll just do a shake, and I can prepare that ahead of time, and just have it available. I take a cooler to work, and so I usually have 3 meals in my cooler. So I have, my second breakfast that I'll usually eat as soon as I get to campus, and as I kind of check email, I have my eggs that get kind of cold before I actually get to eat them, but it's the best I could do time-wise. So I can sit down and eat those then, and then, a couple hours later or so, it's usually right around, probably ends up being noontime because it's right between classes, I'll down a quick shake, because in 30 seconds I can consume that meal. Not the best, but it's getting that balance of protein in there, keeping my insulin levels pretty stable throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, my next meal would be, usually that's when I have I like to have a kale salad with tuna. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's really yum. It's really filling, and I'm just a creature of habit too. And then later on, if I do an afternoon workout, usually after that workout, I'm having another shake that's going to get into the system pretty quickly. And then we have the family sit down dinner at night. Sit down. It's usually in front of the TV, sadly, but that's what you have in teenage kids. But you just have to kind of figure out what works best within your personal habits. How can you do it in your job setting? The key is to have food available that is going to be healthy, fit within your diet, so that you're not getting hungry. In an American diet, we have that tendency to eat a very high carb, breakfast, pancakes, bagels, donuts, all that sugary kind of stuff that we can consume very quickly. And then we get to work and that insulin has spiked and it's now crashed, and you're looking for food and you don't have anything prepared. What are you going to do? You're going to go to the vending machine or convenience store and grab something quick, and that's going to be crap. And that's going to spike you again, and then you eat more crap. So a lot of it is just kind of planning what will work best within your lifestyle. And this just happens to work well for my lifestyle. Being a college professor, it's a little bit easier, I think, than it might be for somebody working kind of an office job or something like that. But, what works for you? What do you do, I should ask?
Well, my 3-second answer is probably taking a little bit of his is probably every other meal is an actual meal, right? To be fair, if it's 6 meals, but 3 of those are going to be real. I get a lot of people, and I pick on women, I pick on postmenopausal women, especially. So the body's slowing down. It's not very efficient. They typically don't like to eat breakfast or not very hungry in the morning. So that's where I'm going for something very light, like, okay, can you eat this carb in the morning? We've done this before, but we haven't done it for a while. And so it'd be like a shake in the morning, some sort of carb source that they will agree with me on. Make it true to eat that. Cool. Next meal is a snack. Then there's an actual lunch. And so just finding a way to trick your body into it. But then also, I think the biggest thing is we got to kick our own ass and create that need for nutrition. Because if the stimulus is there, if I go through and I'm moraling and I train really heavy, or I'm doing cardio really, really hard, there is a need. And I think one of the easiest things we can do to control, to kind of get the diet kicking, is to give that stimulus. So come in here, we kick your butt, and that creates that more consistent need. That need. So that need for energy. And so, because that's like Heidi doesn't, you train Heidi doesn't like to eat a whole lot, doesn't really like breakfast. But when I start kicking her butt and she's doing cardio, that's a little bit more intense. I feel like her body's need goes up for that, and it's more, it'll grab onto the nutrition plan a little bit more that way. So. Questions? Anybody? What you got?
Can I jump back to the essential fatty acids we were talking about?
Yeah.
So you're talking about the omega-3s, 369.
Yep.
Is there any others that are good?
That's you. He said evidence, and I'm like...
MCT oil is something that I found out about recently, and but man, if you take straight MCT oil, you're going to the bathroom. So it's like, I can't live like that. But is there another one? What do you know?
My basics, I just copy and pasted flaxseed and fish oil for the majority of my clients. And then nowadays we have such a higher quality of foods and available supplements. And so I said, hey, let's go for something peer reviewed that's as high a quality as possible for a supplement. MCT oil has been pretty huge though for a long time. I don't know what, I've never taken it. My grandma has taken it every day for however long she's taken it. And so I think that's a pretty good one, but I don't know what to do to help with the stomach side of things.
I probably I don't do MCT oil per se, but I do coconut oil, and I like it in coffee, which the combination is probably not the best for what you're talking about. But, irregularity is not in my dictionary, so. But I mean, that's something I'll do. I just mix it in my coffee, and it gives it a little bit more of a taste to it. It's better than like cream or something.
It actually is really good. I'll like put a little in my mouth and swirl it around and drink coffee and do that thing. Is that like the same thing as MCT oil?
It's very similar. I mean, it's a medium chain. Yeah, it's essentially the same thing. It's just not refined. And it's cheaper. Which I'm Scottish, so I'm all in for cheap. Huh? Yeah, my wife will buy like a big tub at Costco, and it lasts me forever.
Of coconut oil?
Coconut oil, yeah.
Do you do a teaspoon?
It's probably about a half a teaspoon or so. But yeah, a teaspoon of it I think is about 100 calories or so. Yeah, there's been times where I've tried the quote-unquote bulletproof coffee without the trademark after the name, because it's just coconut oil and a little bit of butter in there. And that's like maybe 220 calories, but it's so much better than having, 220 calorie pastry or something like that. And it keeps you sustained for a while. So if you either need more calories or you're kind of putting off your calories, that kind of helps me to kind of stave off hunger for a little bit longer and having those healthier fats. But I just, in terms of fats, I just use whatever the healthier fats when I'm preparing stuff: olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, and just trying to keep the healthier choices. I don't take any real supplements for it. Again, because food is a lot cheaper than supplements sometimes. So.
Okay.
Sorry. I think it's more question for you. So.
Oh shit.
I'll just check your answer.
My relationship with food is kind of similar to yours.
Yeah.
And I was a powerlifter in high school, and I just ate and ate and ate. And it didn't matter because I was 16, 17, 18. Went to the military, same thing. You have it, you eat it, you don't really care. The habit's still there.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, how do you take that from an old habit to transitioning into eating better as a lifestyle?
I think I've done a lot of like extreme weight loss with people, like we're going to drop like 100, 150 pounds, something like that. And then I take bodybuilders, which is also like very much an extreme. I think like as a fat kid, I think you just get to the point where you just fucking hate it. Like it's just worth it. Like I just can't do this. I'm not going to be here. I feel like crap. I don't look the way I want to look. And that's like a small thing, because really like feeling crappy every day is like the worst torture. And so I think the biggest thing is there's going to be a motivation factor where at a certain point, like this task is now unavoidable. I pick on people that are a little bit skinnier than I am, and I say like, well, you're not really consequenced on it necessarily, because like you've never been fat, you've never seen or felt what it's like to be obese or to be that uncomfortable, and you get to that point. I mean, Jeremy, you've lost hundreds of pounds. We were just looking at your guys' pictures from a couple of years ago, and like Jeremy and his wife had lost just the most insane amount of weight. I've never seen a transformation like that. And you guys have been with us for about 3 years now since we first opened, and I think like you could probably speak to, you get to that point where it's just like, I just can't do this anymore. I wish I was less of a foodie, and so you and I kind of have that same gift and curse, but we really love food, right? And so I think you get to that point, it's just not an option anymore. For me, as I'm getting in my 30s, my blood pressure goes up, I'm way more health phobic and conscious than I've ever been in my life, and I used to 10 years ago just not care at all. And so that for me is probably more of an incentive. Like I'm a 300-pound guy. I know that by the time I reach 40, I need to be at least 30 or 40 pounds lighter, maybe walk around at like 260, 270. I cannot be in my 50s at 270. I have to be around like, maybe 240. So I know that there's these steps that I have to make because I really like life. I like all you guys. I like the gym. I kind of want to stay around for this for a little bit longer. And so I think it comes back down to that motivating factor. At a certain point, like, and you've done this before in other areas of your life, like, hey, this is the buy-in, this is the cost, it's just worth it. So strategy-wise, dude, it's a psychological game, but you are in maybe an addictive cycle with your food and your dopamine, and that's what's happening. Like, you're getting a little bit of food, it's this dopamine cycle, and by doing that often enough, you basically desensitize and condition your body to kind of want to keep doing that over and over. You guys are probably trapped in like these cycles of like unhealthy eating, and like at a certain point you get to where like I just can't. And so for me, I'm still big and I have weight that I want to lose. I'm a crash diet. And my whole idea was I'd get my shoulders zipped up. I would diet down, hop on stage, be able to sustain that, and then kind of do it, from there. But there's typically this one session. You're going to have to kick your ass for a minute and be probably more strict than what you would need to be once you've acclimated to a real lifestyle change later. And hopefully that's the last time and you stay sober. Hopefully this is my last time and I stay sober, Tim, are you back there?
Yeah.
What you got?
My question was on the supplementation.
Yeah.
When you're talking cleaning up diet, going to Whole Foods or the carbs and on the macro level, what are the baseline, say, vitamins and timing that you're doing? So if it's an omega-3 or it's turmeric or vitamin C or zinc or a multivitamin, are you implementing that into it? And if so, timing?
That's you. And creatine. And throw creatine at them just for you.
Creatine's about the only supplement I take other than whey protein.
And caffeine?
And caffeine, yeah. So you can, consider caffeine. I consider that just a beverage. It's like water, right? It's hydration. But, for me, the creatine evidence, it more and more seems like you could take it almost any time, convenience-wise. I generally take it kind of during my workouts, really. I just mix it up with some water and some of this little squirt thing, I don't know what else to call them.
It's a little bottle.
The Milo?
Yeah, Mio.
Yeah, Mio, yeah. Just a couple of squirts of that just for some flavor because it's so bitter otherwise. And so I'll just kind of drink that during the workout or maybe spread it out a couple times during the day. But there's no evidence that, that you have to take it around the workout. It just gets into your system and it seems to work pretty well. Other supplements, I don't know.
I think that's like, hey, you've got to get it in a day, and it's a routine that you have to kind of maintain 7 days a week. There are nutrients and certain vitamins that are going to do better, like, hey, magnesium in the evening, and this calcium should be, it's better in the evening versus the morning. In general, just take it. 95% of the benefit probably is going to be can you take this every day versus, taking it 4 or 5 days a week, which is still better than not. I take my vitamins probably, how many times a week do I take them? 4 or 5 days a week, which isn't perfect, but it's better than not. And my grandma, who's a self-proclaimed nutritionist for vitamins and minerals, she gave me this list. She said, this is what I want you to take in the morning, this is what I want you to take in the evening. And so each one can kind of come at a better or different time, but I think that most of it really is just hey, just take the stuff.
And you prefer Fred or Barney?
We used to have these liquid vitamins in my old store that came in what looked like a thing of motor oil, and it tasted like juice, and that was the best that vitamins ever got for me. I don't know if it was good or not, though. But yeah, I think just taking them or not is the biggest thing. Then you've got things that more inhibit sleep or some of your neurocycle stuff that's going on in the evening time. So yeah, there's other ones, and I don't know nearly enough about micronutrients and vitamins and minerals to say these 5 should be in the morning or the evening. But I just say take them, and then if you're diligent enough to know that you could take the ones in the evening, that'd be good. And the nice thing is On It, which is a pretty big company, they make an AM and a PM pack that's, you don't have to think at all. Just get this really expensive, 3 times as much vitamin pack. Who's in the middle? Is somebody in the middle of the question? Is that it? Was that you? Yeah, Mark, go for it.
Supplementation with essential amino acids for recovery.
I prefer branched-chain amino acids. Is that fair to say? What do you like? EAAs versus BCAAs?
Yeah.
Again, it's that difference between kind of average health goals versus performance health goals. Cheapskate versus somebody that's got all kind of money. He makes more than a professor makes, so afford a little bit more of it. I'm not a huge fan of branched chain amino acids because protein is protein. It's going to break down into amino acids and it assimilates into the body slow enough, particularly if we're eating whole meats, that it doesn't make that big a difference for most of us. Now, it may for an athlete or somebody who's a competitive bodybuilder, which is an athlete, anybody who is doing it for performance purposes, I think there could be, a slight edge there. But for most of us, it's going to be a really small component to our overall success and performance. So I would say probably if you're taking them around the workout, because again, that's when your body is most has the highest affinity for those amino acids, and the insulin spikes and everything are going to get them in there. You're taking carbs with it; it'll help bring it into the muscle. But other than that, is it that critical? It's probably not hugely critical.
So
I don't know if I answered your question. What's that?
As long as you get the good foods.
Yeah, you got to eat protein, and you got to eat well.
My answer is like somewhat different. It's not that much different. If you are in a diet, so one of the 3 things I did in college was I wrote this like 5,000 page paper on branched chain amino acids. And everything you look at out there was basically in the absence of carbohydrates. So if you are pretty depleted or if your body is running on empty, yes, it can use those amino acids to sustain energy and to do some cool things for you. Typically, it's an intra-workout thing, and the biggest, if you don't know this, supplement companies have this whole racket going on right now where they want everybody to have essential amino acids intra-workout now, as opposed to branched chain amino acids. So you've got what, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Is that your branched chains?
Sounds about right.
Okay, so that's your branched chains. So those are the 3 ones that are most responsible for muscle gain, repair, cell growth, stuff like that. So I've noticed that if I give them to people, because everybody's blood sugar about half to 2/3 through the workout just kind of tanks. So technically in a little bit, you're at kind of like a carbohydrate deficit. You might notice like some benefit from it. If you're dieting and you're starving, you're really pushing it, you're definitely going to notice something from it. But I've had people like in my off-season bodybuilders when they're in a pretty fed state, and if anything, they're probably overfed. I don't really think that it's a super big deal, but I think athletes and endurance people, like while they're starved and they're, they can't have any calories, it does okay for them. But like endurance athletes, we'd rather them have like carbs while they're running or doing something, an actual energy. And so most of my athletes, I give them like an intra-workout carbohydrate. It's usually cyclic dextrose. It's a really fast digesting carb. It gives them some energy. If I do give them aminos, it's branched chain amino acids. Females seem to notice a little bit more from it, I've noticed. And that's not like a scientific thing. It's just in a survey of 1 million women that I've trained, and the girls have noticed it maybe a little more. The guys notice it when they're starving at the very end of prep. They really lean on the aminos.
So I read that, and I think you touched upon it. The big thing, essential versus branched chain, right? It's like, why not have them all rather than just 3?
Yeah.
And so, is there really any validity to that argument?
Usually it's like that sweet spot of like 10 grams of branched chains, or like 5 to 10 grams is like a good amount. And then when you're getting the EAAs, I think they're typically selling you a cheaper supplement that doesn't have enough leucine, isoleucine, and valine in it. And that's why they're really big on doing these EAAs, because there's no new science out in the last like couple years that we should now switch to it. But the branding and all the business side of supplement companies is all about essential amino acids now. And I noticed that because when I started my nutrition company 10 years ago, intra-workout was like the thing. They had just figured out how to like give people, other than Gatorade, they'd give you some intra-workout carbohydrates and take branched chains. And that was the religion. Everybody had to do it. And so, we're just like a GNC, so like, here, you need intra-workout aminos. And for $29.99, you can have these aminos, Mark. So I think when you're getting the EAAs, you're not getting as much of the good stuff, but likely, you'll notice some benefit, but it's not otherworldly. You'll get something out of it, but maybe not a ton. If you're starved and dieting down at that very end, it'll help you. What do we got, guys? Is that the end?
Go ahead.
Not that I just freaked me out. You're smarter than us.
Just for like everybody here, just like describe like intermittent fasting, just the role that does have on your body as far as like the glycogen stores in the muscle bodies, what that does to kind of like numbing the system for the better, for the worse, right? Does it work? Because traditionally we touched on it, like eating breakfast is just one of those hardest things for people, right? And like why that's important, what that does for you, choosing not to eat that. And if you do intermittent fast and you're like, oh, well, I get all my calories in 2 meals a day, just describe like the harm and the benefits.
We went on this a lot last time, because intermittent fasting, we did this a couple years ago, was really big. If you guys don't know what intermittent fasting is, you don't eat for between like 12 and 16 hours, and you have like a 6 to 8, maybe 10 hour window that you eat in, but typically 6 to 8 hours. So imagine waking up not eating at all whatsoever until noon. And between noon and 6 o'clock, you can eat whatever you want. And then once 6 o'clock is done, you can't eat anything. And you were really big, and I probably still are, on the Renaissance diet.
Yeah,
I met that guy, by the way. I was in Florida, and I was working out, and I was like, hey, I know that company. He's like, yeah, I made it. Okay, he's like Dr. whatever, this huge dude.
Dr. Israel.
So I think the biggest thing with that's likely winning for intermittent fasting is that it's hard to overeat in 6 hours. You know what I mean? But if you told me that like, hey, I've got to eat 6 meals, then it gets to the end of the day and it's kind of easy for me to get flexible on what meals 5 and 6 can be, especially when nobody's watching me other than God at my house. So I think the biggest thing for intermittent fasting that I think is successful about it is it does this thing, it stops you from eating and it prevents you from overeating and over-consuming calories in a big window. And that was kind of our thing from last time, right?
Yeah.
But your question was more on like kind of the science of it, and there's the scientist.
I don't know if I could speak to all the science behind it. To some extent, I don't focus in on the real nuanced science of some of the stuff because it's, how much do we really need to understand? And part of me is also how much do I really trust the scientists that are doing that science? Because studies are often manipulated in the favor of the outcomes that they want.
Right.
And I've done research for supplement companies that I'll never do again because I've been subpoenaed twice.
Really?
Yeah.
That's exciting. Why didn't we ever learn that?
Oh, I thought I told you that. And the second subpoena they ended up losing, and it turned out that of the 7 groups that did research, our study was the only one that did not either flat out fabricate results or design the study in order to get favorable results. And they had threatened to sue me because I wouldn't share the data as saying that there was I think it was like a 740 some odd % greater fat loss in the treatment group than in the placebo. Well, yeah, there was that percentage, but when you have a very, very small number and you multiply that by 700%, it's still a very, very small number. And so somewhere there's a quote in the New York Times of me responding to the threat that they would sue me if I didn't change the data. I said, God, bring it on. I'm not going to change the data. And so I don't have a lot of faith in a lot of the studies, and a lot of them are done in academic settings where it's the same individuals that are participating in these studies. So you have to really be careful in how you evaluate those results. And with that being said, I haven't read a lot on all the intermittent fasting studies because I think it works for some people, and if it works for those people, then that's okay. I'm not going to kind of question that. If it doesn't work, then there's far other options regarding the diet. But the challenges with the intermittent fasting is that you are trying to cram a lot more nutrients into a shorter period of time, and can your body really assimilate those well enough to be able to use those effectively, and how are you able to manage through the rest of that day? A lot of us cannot go 16 hours without eating unless you sleep for 14 of those hours, and it's like, okay, I could just go 2 hours and I can have my first meal. And so it's not going to work for everybody, but if it works for people I've talked to that do it, they swear by it and they feel fine with it. One problem that I see with it is, for me, training in the morning. I'm going to be training fasted, and then I'm going to have another 8 hours before, probably maybe 6 or 7 hours before I can ultimately eat. And my body has been craving carbohydrates and protein and all that, and I'm not giving it to it. And then all of a sudden, when it's given up on getting it, then I feed it. I don't think it's going to work as effectively. But if you're training closer to that, if you're training in the afternoon and you can get yourself through the day and not, dive into the box of donuts in the office or something like that, then, it might work for you. But I personally prefer much more of the spread out multiple meal approach to it. I think you're going to get the better overall performance. Your body and your hormones, everything going on in your body is going to be much more balanced throughout the day if you're balancing the intake and the food that you have, and if you're exercising regularly and you're sleeping regularly and that kind of stuff.
Well,
I don't know if that's an adequate answer, but
like Phil, who I know you want to go back to doing what you're doing, and it worked well, but you're not going to get jacked doing it. And so for most of us that were athletes, we're trying to do muscle stuff, we're trying to get stronger. I mean, everybody here and their grandma nowadays is into working out and training. So I think for the performance benefits, physiologically, intermittent fasting probably doesn't fit into that per se. But as a food addict who really struggles eating at night, if you told me that I could only eat between 12 and 6, it'd probably be pretty effective for me to be able to lose weight. Now, for women, I think you're going to have some metabolic damage or some inefficiencies in their metabolism because their body is going to get conservative and efficient in the wrong way, just like Phil's is, where it's used to running on very limited amount of food. And at some point, you are going to eat. You might not maintain intermittent fasting forever. And so at a certain point, when your body goes back to that, except now we have insulin and blood sugar sensitivities, now my body wants to metabolize and store and do weirder things with this food than if I were to just do something more sustainable throughout the day. And even just look at protein digestion. If I make up a number, 200 grams of protein is what Alex needs per day, and I've only got 6 hours to do that, it's like, okay, I have to have 85 grams of protein in each meal at 12, 3, and 6. You're like, damn, man, that's going to be tough. So some of that stuff just doesn't work for us. I think the only athlete that I think I've seen intermittent fasting be like, hey, it works great for me, seems to be endurance athletes. I don't know what it is, that just seems like those are the people that kind of lean towards the intermittent fasting side of things. But
and that seems even,
which is weird because they're not long-term carb
counterintuitive.
loading. That'd be horrible. Imagine if you tried to do that, right? You'd die. It would be it. And it's honestly the intermittent fasting thing. So my dieting style of 6 meals a day, steady state carb intake, controlling and manipulating fats in certain windows, the antichrist of that is intermittent fasting. Give me an intermittent fasting person, that's the person that I'd have to spend 6 to 9 months fixing the damage to their metabolism and getting their body to talk to itself the right way again after all that's done. So I'm always kind of anti on that. But I think if it works effectively for you, especially for larger people that are trying to lose weight and sustain that or just kind of keep the cookie down, okay, can't have cookies after 6. I work from 12 to 6, so it would work well for me probably.
And I think for somebody that is in that situation where it's really just about losing body fat and they have a significant amount of body fat to lose, that the biggest thing for them is caloric restriction. You're delaying the binging as much as possible, and your likelihood of binging too much when you have to cram all those calories in the end of the day is going to be less than somebody who gets up in the morning and they have kind of a normal breakfast and they have a huge breakfast and now they got to go the rest of the day without eating. It's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah.
So I think in some situations it can be a little bit easier to restrict the caloric intake, but as Alex mentioned, it's going to be the least favorable probably overall for performance, particularly if you're trying to put on muscle mass.
How do we do, guys? Yes, go for it.
I haven't heard anything about salt yet, and I'm kind of wondering if you have
Yes.
any advice on that.
Tons of it.
Especially as you move towards whole foods, making your own foods, and you have more control over how much sodium is in what you're eating.
Do I go or do you go?
Either way.
So I get in the bodybuilding community a long time ago, the Stone Age thing was kind of to be afraid of sodium and to not salt your foods, thinking that you would retain more water. Well, it's one of your 4 main electrolytes. You got sodium, potassium, chloride, and magnesium. So that sodium is really essential for maintaining cell balance. Now, you salting your food on whatever comes from home or is more of a natural whole food is so much different than the amount of sodium that's put into a preserved something in a package that can stay that way for a really long time. It's really, really hard for people to get too much sodium if they literally just salt and season their foods to whatever. And I like salt. I use a lot of sauces. I like all the processed stuff too. But it's not really an issue for me. But I'll get athletes that will restrict sodium and do funny things with it. We're going to talk afterwards because I have one that's not eating enough sodium, and it does create some problems and create some sensitivities at the very end towards when we're going to get on stage. We use more advanced diuretic protocols and dehydration, and one of the things that can cause a problem for some of these bodybuilders is the kind of oversensitive response to sodium because they get used to not having it. It helps your cells balance out. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's the thing that's so bad in all of our processed foods, but it's crappier sodium. There's so much more of it, and that's so different from you salting your steak too much. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't be afraid of it. It's typically never an issue for people. And I think when they're given the recommendation to avoid all the sodium, if you're a heart patient or for health, they're just trying to get you to put down the shitty food.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think, avoid the processed food first, and you're going to cut your sodium significantly. And, if you need to salt food that's already prepared, then you got to kind of blame the cook. There could be better seasoning or whatever in there. But if blood pressure is not a problem and you're not having any other health issues as a result of the sodium that you're currently having, it's not going to be a big deal. I prefer like a Himalayan, like a red salt. Just I think it's more flavorful. There's more minerals to it, and it just seems to go a lot further than the more traditional iodized.
Yeah. And I really like the one they put on your French fries, so I prefer the iodized.
But one thing to consider with any kind of seasoning is you're trying to lose weight. If you're trying to cut your calories and cut your food intake, putting more flavoring in your food is going to make it more satisfying to you, so you're going to want more. So that's something to consider if you want to kind of cut down your food, is cut back on your seasoning a little bit so that it is a little less palatable to you, so that you're not, oh, it's just so good to eat more and more of it. Because, if you have food that is really, really good, you're going to want to eat more of it. And so, putting more salt on may actually cause you to eat more. But from the standpoint of your fluid balances and things like that, it's, unless it's an issue, it's not an issue.
More salt, you're just going to crave that tilapia. It's gonna be good. Most of my clients, and it's like, and I've had a lot of people, I've dieted so many people, both athletes, performance athletes, bodybuilders, general population, lots of women, and even older women too, is that the sodium's typically not an issue too much for them. Like, nobody salted their chicken too much. It's like, oh, too much chicken breast, more sweet potato. Most of them hate their foods. They're like trying to get used to eating these whole foods and healthy stuff. So,
what about salt around the margarita rim?
My drinks come with sugar around the rim, so mine are a little bit different. Yeah, gotta be fruity.
You had a question?
So about protein digestion, now you kind of spoke to it just a second ago, like for a moment, but is there an upper end of what a healthy amount of protein per meal would be? Not necessarily like ounces of chicken, but say, 100 grams of protein, that's way the heck too much.
That one's too much.
What is the 50 or 60 grams per meal if you're eating 6 meals a day? Like, what's the kind of upper end of what you would recommend to somebody that's a bigger dude?
And so I have noticed that taller women, bigger guys, you and I are large frame men, so I've noticed structurally that those people, and this is more of a bro science application, so don't rip me apart, is that those structures tend to work well with higher amounts of protein. Anytime I get a girl that's 5'10", 5'11", regardless of body weight, structurally, her body tends to digest and work well with higher amounts of protein. I think for guys, let's say that 50 grams is kind of high on that side of things, and that, maybe on the low end of like 40 to 50. Some guys, maybe are going to have trouble with 30 or 35 if they're sensitive men. And so I think that, you play with it, your body will tell you too much, like pretty quickly. And so I always give people that ballpark range. Now, at the heaviest or highest, I can tell you that my protein intake was at about 450 grams a day. I know that sounds like a lot, but I was a 340-pound athlete. I'm training at a very high level. I burn like 3,000 calories a session. This is like 10 years ago, and that's where I was like 330. I was large and in charge. I know my body used that protein because I didn't have trouble digesting it, and the only thing that contributed to my fat storage, I think, was all the carbs and fats, not that side of things. And so you'll experiment. You'll start at 6 ounces. Is that, I'm starved. I could totally eat 7 or 8 ounces. Some people tend to be more natural meat eaters or protein digesters. I've seen that before. Like that lady I mentioned, 135 pounds. She would eat 6 ounces of cooked protein for every single meal, no problems, absolutely starved and ready to eat that next meal. And then Phil is really mad at me for this 5 ounces that I keep forcing him to eat. So that tells you how much of a range there can be. But for you, I'm saying like 40, 50 grams of protein is probably pretty easy for you. The nice thing too is that's a base that's going to make it to where there's only so much room for extra carbs and fats. So it might help, lower, wanting to eat more of the other stuff that you maybe don't want to.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, it's interesting what you said about the bigger bone. I'm not prepared with the numbers, but I know there's a researcher that looked at anthropometrically.
What does that mean? Anthropometric.
Looking at the body.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big word.
I thought you were joking with me. But he was looking at how much muscle people could on relative to their bone. And I want to say it's like 1 pound of muscle for every 5 pounds of bone. Don't quote me on that, and it's recorded, so it's going eternally. But that sounds about right. And so, the bigger boned you are, the more muscle mass that you can put on. So it would make sense that you would have a capacity to consume more protein, because more of that protein is going to go into, building muscle as opposed to storage as fat. Whereas somebody who maybe is a more slighter frame, lighter boned, they may not be able to support as much muscle, and so that added protein is more immediately going to be converted into, ideally glycogen stores in the muscle, but more likely fat stores.
So would you say, and this is kind of like my question, but it helps them and it kind of helps us too, is dependent on these kind of basic boxes of endomorph, ectomorph, mesomorph, do you see those body types like, okay, this guy's like naturally broad-shouldered, muscular, kind of has that propensity for like a mesomorph? Would that person likely, without putting any much science to it, would they likely be more for having a higher protein intake?
I would say that's probably a good case.
Yeah.
Again, no science to back that, but it would make sense. And I think when you get down to the ectomorph, those are people that can end up eating almost anything, and it's not really changing their body type. But it says people in the middle that or the endomorphs that have a little bit more challenge with some of that.
That makes sense. Yes.
Okay.
You're smiling, so it's got to be a good one.
Nah, I think it's because it's like, I feel like such an asshole. It's like, okay, this won't apply to anyone else probably, but here we go. So I'm like 100% that person that's like outside of the normal on this one. It's like, I'll be like, oh shit, it's 2 o'clock, I haven't eaten yet.
Yeah.
So I totally am that person. And like, I function okay.
Yeah, I
I
bet.
can come in, work out, do all that stuff, but it's like, I feel like I can do better probably, is the presumption. So how do you recommend like getting started on trying to push up like when I am eating? Because I've done it before where it's like, okay, I need to get on top of this, I do 5 meals a day, I'm gonna do this, that, and then I'll get up, I'll be like 8 o'clock, I'll eat breakfast, and I just feel like shit. I just feel like super sluggish, I'll feel terrible, and it's just like, it's like this ongoing thing of like, I'm gonna try this, feel terrible, bail on it. And like kind of falling back to old habits, like I know I can be doing better, but like what do you recommend for like getting started on kind of what I feel like is going to be the journey?
I think it's like starting off with stuff that's real easy. I always go for the people that don't like to eat breakfast or do something big and satiating and full. I'll go for like a lighter fat. Here, do a protein shake. My dad is about 5'6", he's this big, he's a little round dude, and he's like, I'm not hungry in the morning, my body just doesn't want it. But also, for 40 years, he's been not eating breakfast, so your body became conditioned to this over a long period of time, and to do anything as an alternative to that, I think is gonna take it, not a similar amount of time, it's not gonna take you 20 years to go the opposite way, but it might take a few weeks or a few months of putting something that's sustainable, but is like, it's good for you. It might not be like, if I wrote you a huge meal plan, hey, eat all this protein, all this food, you're like, I can't eat this food, we would make those adjustments to what you could eat, and it's like protein shake and a very light, easy carb in the morning. Like, hey, this oat, it just makes me too full, I can't digest it. Awesome, here's a banana, here's a protein shake. After 7 days, you will be hungry come 10 o'clock. So I think it's you start off small and figure out where you can do that. My brother is a big intermittent fasting person. That's why we like to argue a lot. If I believe in it, my brother believes the opposite. He's like, well, I work out and do CrossFit at 9 in the morning, and I don't eat until 12, and I feel great. I'm like, well, you're an asshole. But
I remember when intermittent fasting started being a thing.
See, I'm right. I told you, you're not.
So I changed nothing. Awesome, guys. Cool tip. But that works so great for me. So.
No, I think it's just going real slow. You can go with these really ridiculously small bird portions to just get the timing and the schedule and the digestion on track, and then from there, your body will get the stimulus and it'll start to know what to do, I think.
I think it's that whole baby steps kind of principle. And your comment about going the opposite way, with food, it's always just those small little steps. What can you do? It's like with my alcohol, it's like turn it down just,
Shots, you said it earlier.
No, I didn't say shots. Doing, just a little bit lower alcohol content and kind of working down to where you can actually wean yourself to liking, not Michelob Ultra, but get to a point where it's, a tolerable level. You're just kind of taking those small little steps. Like you said, a banana is something pretty easy to kind of fit in there and then just start kind of boosting it up a little bit more protein, more meals, and just step-by-step working that way.
Jumping off of that, you mentioned meal timing earlier. I was wondering if you were meaning like eating at the same time every day or the same distance away from.
A little bit of both. Ideally, I think people should be waking up at the same time every day, like in a perfect world. But I think the biggest thing is based on when you wake, following a schedule from that point. So I'm a shift worker. So some days I wake up and I got to go to work at 5 a.m. and I work 3 12s. Okay. So that diet and that schedule is going to look different. I wake up at 4:30. I have my first meal, roughly every 3 hours from that point throughout the day till the end of the day. And then I've got 4 days off my shift where I'm totally normal. So I think if you can fit the timing between meals, those rules of thumb for where your pre-workout meal should be, post-workout, eating within 20 to 30 minutes of waking up. Like I said, meals every X hours. That's what it's more about. If in a perfect world, yeah, we probably should all wake up at the same time every day and kind of have something that's pretty static to it, I think. I look for you as I'm like,
yeah, right. And I do the same. Am I right?
Good. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm flattered. Anything else, you guys? Anything non-exercise related? You're like, hey, my friend said I should do this. Is it right or wrong? Okay, we made it. Thank you guys very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.